Hello, everyone, and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. We are here today to cover the Dune Imperium Grand Semifinal of the WSBG. That means these four players did not elect to play this game, but were assigned this game because they each won a different game. We're going to dive straight into the video because this is a long one, and I will let you know right now. So this is a 3-hour game of Dune Imperium, and I accidentally already recorded this and messed up the audio, so I'm re-recording. And the video is going to play at 50% additional speed. So if the players look like they're on amphetamines, that is because I have artificially inflated the speed of play in this game. And we have David here in seat one. He's the Raw winner this year. He's also the only player to have won rings in two different events across WSBG 2022 and 2023, one in each of those years. So that's a pretty impressive track record for him. And he's going to open with Duke Leto's ring, not using the ring's power because there's no one to draft off of and no spice to even use, to grab 3 money at a secure contract, which I think is a great, that's I collect money at the beginning of this game. I think securing contract is a great way to start the game. Alec, who is the acquire winner, he went ahead and drafted the Beast. I'll come back to the draft picks a little bit later when there's a lull. And he grabbed 2 extra spice by heading over to Haga Basin. So I think he's pretty clearly indicating that he's going to be selling some melange and going to be rushing a sword master at the beginning of the game, which I think is a plenty powerful action to take as he gets himself straight up to 3 spice. It's a nice little opening for him. Scott Kushner is playing, he was the winner of the Seven Wonders game, and he's playing as Baron Harkonnen, who needs money to activate his ring. So not a huge surprise, I think, that he uses his turn to head on over to the Emperor, grab himself some wealth, so that he has the option of getting some money in that fashion. And then Scott Leader is the Azul winner, and he is in last seat here with Helena Richese, and headed on up to Carthag to get an intrigue card and some troops, which I think he's just going to push in. I think it makes sense. This is a first round victory point. So yeah, I like the push in of 3 troops there. Posturing early is nice. The only downside of this is that because everybody has troops in their reserve, if someone comes in and hardy warriors for 4 troops over the top, that's going to be a pretty painful round for Scott. Getting second place in this for the cost of 3 troops would not be all that great. So hopefully for him, no one else kind of makes that option there. And then the other thing is that he uses his ring to hate draft Kwisatz Haderach, which I think is a very weird choice. He can't. There's no way to afford that, even with Helena's 1 discount on persuasion on the first round. So I think he's just destroying it from the row. And I guess I can understand kind of the logic behind it, but I would maybe be grabbing something that I'd be interested in maybe taking, like the space travel or the Thufir. Space travel is only so, but I'd maybe even hate draft Gurney Halleck over the Kwisatz as the person that is most likely to be able to afford something. I as Scott would want to keep Kwisatz Haderach in play, but it is a very scary card, so it's a little tough to say. David here went somewhere. Where did I see a green worker go? Oh, he went on down into the Fremen area and pushed a pair of troops in for second place. I think it makes sense to push in, I guess, 2 instead of 1, and the rewards there are fine. He's accruing some resources. I still think maybe a Hardy Warriors over the top would have been a more punitive play, but I think this is a totally fine choice on his part. Alec is going to continue on the I have faction access game. It tends to be pretty open in terms of faction access at the beginning because of that Seek Allies card that a lot of them have been playing. Not a lot of diplomacies, a lot of Seek Allies so far. And he's going to head on to Fold Space to open up his gameplay options. I personally would go to Secrets over Fold Space. I just like having those intrigue cards early and being able to kind of make my game plan around, because some of them have requirements or sort of ask you to do certain things. So I like to draw those earlier rather than in the mid or late game, ideally. And moving on up the Bene Gesserit space, I think is just a smidge more powerful. So that's where I'd head. And Scott L is going to agree that that's what he's going to do. But I want to roll back to Scott K's turn because Scott took a very fascinating line with an early pass. And an early pass that allowed him to pick up space travel, which to me is overvaluing the space travel card. I think it's okay, but I don't think that I don't think it's worth sacrificing an early action to pick it up. So I'm not entirely sure what Scott was thinking as he did that. And I didn't get a good glance at what cards it was that he discarded, but I do remember that it's not that he has plenty of options about where he could go in terms of stuff that he could grab and play with his actions. Now I'm sure he's, yeah, I think an early pass requires you to grab a card that really makes a big difference, or, even like using the card for the persuasion is essential, but he flipped 4 cards in his hand. So it's not like affording the space travel at 3 was terribly difficult either. So we see both David and Alec passing here, and neither of them had enough to buy anything spicy off the board. So it looks like we're maybe just getting some liaison purchases, but I think actually it's even possible. I didn't quite see David and Alec's motions. Maybe they didn't even buy liaisons, like just trying to keep their deck light. I miss that. But either way, what that means is that really no one has bought anything spicy off the row here. Scott K with a space travel is the only one who has anything of real value off the top here. And, whipping through this first round here, you might ask me, why are we playing this game at 50% additional speed? This was a very fast first round, and it was, but I promise you it will slow down from here. So you'll be happy at the additional acceleration, I think, later on. Yeah, so a kind of awkward turn. Like, no one managed to get any really exciting cards off the row, but there are exciting things up there. I think the fact that folks didn't get to buy exciting cards off the row implies that there's going to be a lot of convincing arguments in round 2. So people are going to be able to buy, your power plays, your Thuffirs, maybe even a Gurney Halleck, which is something that I think is worth passing early for. That is definitely a pretty powerful card. But Alec is going to kick off round 2 here with the Cell Melange that we sort of expected. And he's going to head on over, I imagine, as a second action to Swordmaster and start just taking 3 actions right from the beginning of round 2 here, which is a pretty sweet start line for him. I'm a big fan of that. And we saw, that sort of rush Swordmaster path be a pretty crucial decision point in the Dune Imperium ring final, where the players did choose to play this game, and were very well prepared for it. Scott K here is going to pick up some more money thanks to Dune the Desert Planet. Interesting that he hasn't done it with the ring, where he'd pay $1 with the ring to get an intrigue card. I think he would have played the ring last turn if he could have. So I'm quite confident that he has the ring in hand right now. Oh, it looks like he's maybe rolling back the action anyway. I think one of the Baron's ability is great. I think he's just one of the most powerful leaders in the game. Getting those sort of 2 faction bumps at some point in the game is almost like getting a victory point, because I kind of consider every faction bump like a half victory point for the most part. And paying a coin for an intrigue card is a completely solid ring power. But it does lead to some awkward sequences here. Like, maybe he was looking at secure contract. I'll get up to $5. I could buy a High Council seat, but you can't buy a High Council seat and use the Baron Harkonnen's ring. So because money is at such a is in such high need for base game Dune Imperium, I think that it can be difficult to decide when you want to be using those kinds of powers. And you want to use it all the time, but then, hey, maybe it puts you behind on these other sort of main tempo points, which I think is tough. And so instead, he's going to go ahead and grab 2 spice and kind of limp into this combat. This combat, by the way, is a great way to pick up some extra cash. And I really like pushing 2 troops in here rather than just the 1. I think it's very easy for someone to go over top the 1 troop. And with the 2 troops here, he's probably going to get at least 2 coins. And while that's not necessarily a great ratio, 2 troops for 2 coins, it does make other players have to pay a little bit more for getting in those coins, and depending on what the dagger situation in his hand, he could get second place, depending on what other folks decide to do along the way. Scott L will take the opportunity to secure contracts, and Scott K didn't, which I think is great. Pick himself up a couple of dollars. We see sort of a spreading of cash, and whatever ends up happening with this conflict this turn, I think is going to dictate a lot about what happens in turn 3, because Scott's going to get the first crack at whatever goes on. You know, if he wins this conflict with his $2, he gets $6, he goes up to 8. Hooray, Swordmaster. But then again, we were just talking about he might use a coin for his ring, so it's not entirely clear that is going to be the case. Duke Leto here has $5 thanks to David's early actions from turn 1, which is going to allow him to either pick up an immediate High Council or a Mentat, or both, thanks to his $1 discount. And it looks like he's going to throw $1 at Mentat right now, draw a card, reshuffle his kind of like mediocre discard pile. It's going to be a little bit awkward for him if he does end up drawing his ring off the top there, because that's a ring you want to be using a whole lot. But as long as he doesn't draw his ring, I think I dig this reshuffle well enough, in that it's not like it doesn't matter too much. I think at this stage whether he's reshuffling his deck or not. I don't think his current hand, if I remember the cards that he drew from the first round, is all that exciting that he's worried about the cards in his current hand going into the discard pile. But I do think drawing a ring would make his options a little bit more limited, which is awkward for him. We're going to see a Swordmaster here. To go back to the draft, so drafting, by the way, in this game is reverse turn order. So Scott L had first pick, and Helena, I think, is a really popular pick. That one extra persuasion is nice, but also in a 4-player game, just being able to head into Carthag or Arakeen or pick up your Swordmaster without having to worry about what other players are doing is just a nice amount of flexibility. I've already mentioned that I think Baron Harkonnen is just a bunch of raw power, so we see those two get picked up first, I think, quite often. The Beast, I think, is very, very good as well. Just those starting resources gets you off to a good start, and a trickle of extra troops over the course of the game lets you have some more options of actions that you're going to take. It's just a good, like, raw resource Euro game style approach of collecting things. And then Duke Leto, I think, is a very powerful leader, but he's most awkward in first seat because of exactly what we saw with David. He drew his ring on the first turn, was basically unable to use it. And that's really a bummer, because I think Duke Leto's advantage is you want to pick up some spice and get those extra faction movements thanks to his little drafting power there, which I think is really helpful. I mean, drafting in terms of not taking cards, but drafting in terms of following behind people in racing games, or just normal races, I guess. Scott here heads up to the Hall of Oratory. That is really fascinating. Suggests to me that he is holding on to 5 persuasion in hand and is looking to pick up a Gurney Alec. And Scott L says, you know what? I've got cash thanks to my intrigue card. I'm up an extra $2, so I'm going to head straight into the council seat here, which is a nightmare for David, who I think was very heavily considering that line of play himself. And kind of as a surprise, Scott's grabbed that out from under him. And we see that David picked up his cards and fanned him out. So I have to assume from that body language that what I'm saying here is correct. Like, actually, Scott L has just totally nerfed his plans. And that's a good play for Scott L as well. It's that the extra 2 is almost certainly going to let him pick up a Thufir or a power play up top here. Me personally, I would be going for Thufir. I think he's quite good. A lot of flexibility, extra card draw. But power play is not a terrible option either. We're going to get a reveal here. Oh, a reveal with 2 people still available. I guess this is in order to pick up Thufir because he was sort of planning on going to the High Council seat. But I think this is a very, very bad choice. He's got 2 workers left because of the Mentat. And one of them, he had a diplomacy card in there and could have gone to any of a gazillion spots out there. You know, Hardy Warriors, push some troops in, get some money that way. Secrets, fold space, Emperor. I mean, any number of available spots with his diplomacy card. Now, admittedly, his other cards are a little bit more awkward because he had like a Dune Desert Planet, but he's holding on to 2 water, so he could grab the 4 spice, which isn't bad for Duke Leto, he needs the spice over the course of the game. It's not the greatest ratio to spend 2 water for 4 spice, but it's not the worst either. I really, really dislike that early pass. I think that's, I mean, I appreciate wanting to improve your deck, but this is not, it's kind of a deck building game, but also, the game is short enough that there's that tempo loss, that resource loss of that early pass. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Alec here is going to continue pushing on the spacing guild action, picking up another fold space here. So he's going to be able to do whatever he wants to, essentially, in the coming turns. It gives him a point, but I think what's more important for the Beast is right getting up to that alliance thing. So I think he's indicating that he wants to get up to that alliance space for the Beast's ring to become unlocked. And I feel like in a lot of ways, the Spacing Guild Alliance is the least exciting of them. It's the least contested. So I guess it has the advantage of sort of he could get up there and just sort of like stay there. But also the reward, I think, is not quite as good. It's a little bit awkward. Scott K does indeed buy Gurney Halleck, which leaves Scott L with basically the option of buying Power Play since Thufir has been taken off the board. And then we head back to Alec, who sees the Gunthopter, has the 2 convincing arguments, and is happy to pick that up to just kind of lean heavily into the combat space. And we quickly have a pretty crappy row here with Sardaukar Infantry Scout and Missionaria Protectiva clogging things up. Chome Directorship is obviously a very, very spicy purchase, but it's quite expensive. And Worm Rider is also very, very good. So we might see some players in round 3 do an early pass and blink here. Scott gets just an easy 6 coins here. And I think other players really missed out on the opportunity to just shove a few extra troops in there. Like I was talking about how much I disliked David's early pass. If he shoved 1 troop in there from going to using his Dune Desert Planet to pick up some spice, he picks up some extra money along the way too. And I just think that would have been so much better for his position. We did see David in last year's semifinal get stuck on Brass Birmingham. It was a game he clearly hadn't played. So I wouldn't be surprised if he hasn't played much of this game either. I think he's a kind of player that indicates a mastery over the games that he's playing as he kind of keeps rising up to the top. But I don't think that he necessarily has the wider experience that some players in this tournament do. I know a few of the players at this table, and I don't think any of them would like describe themselves as Dune Imperium players. I think the level of experience at this table is probably in the 10 or fewer games for each player. I think from what I know about them, and I might be missing something. So if one of you guys are watching, let me know in the comments. Scott K goes ahead and uses his 5 coins to grab a High Council seat, which sucks for David, who's not going to be able to use his coins to do exactly that. So he should maybe be looking at getting himself Swordmaster situation. Interesting that Scott passed up on the opportunity to buy himself a Swordmaster. To me, that suggests that he has a ring in hand. He wants to be able to use that coin to buy the Intrigue card. I'll note that he didn't end up doing that last round too. So maybe it was because of his early pass in the first round and I just didn't see that he discarded the ring. Scott L rips his power play right off the top and decides that he's going to jump into Fremen World. Now, Fremen is kind of one of the more exciting friendships to have early because it unlocks the Siege Tabur space. Tabor, but also Worm Riders is up there. So if Scott's able to pick up Worm Riders this turn, friendship with the Fremen looks a lot more interesting. So I can absolutely see that being the choice there. The only downside is that it's certainly one of the more contested alliances, and David, who is Duke Leto, the king of stealing your alliance from you, is already sitting at space 1 on that track and probably has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder from Scott L's earlier plays. So it's a dangerous alliance to fight for. So I think that's something that Scott L is going to have to worry about. You know, those faction bumps, like I described them as half a point each because every 2 points gets you every 2 moves gets you a point if you get to the friendship level, and then another 2 moves gets you a point if it's to an alliance level. But if you have to start defending those alliances, the values of those move spaces goes down. David here is going to pick up a bunch of spice. It looks like he's only picking up 4, but that's because he's using the 5th one with his ring. And he could do exactly what we just talked about. He drafts in after Scott L, gets himself a friendship with the Fremen here. I think that makes a lot of sense. He has a lot of options, but this is the one that's probably most interesting right now. I don't see any reason why he would go for one of the other ones. I guess you could argue that it makes sense maybe to go to like Bene Gesserit because no one else is kind of racing up that track, so he could become kind of the king of that track and not worry about competing himself. So that could be a way of looking at it as well. But I like the Fremen move here for him. And he pushes 1 troop into this battle. This is a not exciting battle where the 2nd and 3rd places are going to get a couple spice. So it's sort of like trading in a troop for some spice, which is okay. Being the first person there, you're also disincentivizing other players from pushing in a singleton troop. I don't think this is the kind of battle you want to go crazy on. I think Alec, if he decides to push in 3 here, it's tough because I think pushing in 2 sort of almost invites players to come in and go over top of you, but pushing in 3 is pretty expensive for the rewards, which I think are an intrigue and a couple spice. I like the pushing of 2. I think that's the greedy kind of play I would make. And Scott K and Scott L, both with their high council seats, they probably have bigger things to worry about than getting in the mix with a kind of mediocre battle here. I think they want to probably leave those troops in garrison and do some other things. Scott K here is going to pick up some spice, some pretty discounted spice at the 1 water to 3 spice ratio. So that's the kind of Haga Basin we like to see. And we'll throw in a coin as he is indeed using his ring. So that makes sense. We'd kind of expected that he had that given that he didn't grab the Swordmaster at the beginning of the round. Given that secure contract is there, he could have actually kind of pulled off the full Monty, the Swordmaster and the ring, if he'd wanted to, but there's no way he could have known that would have stuck around for the whole round, which makes a big difference. And he'll just slide 1 troop in here, maybe pick up some incidental spice, which makes it a little bit of a brawl between him and David. It's a little actually awkward for Alec too, because it sort of incentivizes David to maybe push in some extra troops, but he doesn't have any in garrison, so I guess the odds of that are a little bit on the lower side. I think that if Scott L had faction access, like a diplomacy something, that would be the kind of play that he'd be making right now. I think he does want to buy Worm Riders. We see he's got a convincing argument in hand as he tilts his hand a little bit into the camera, but not quite enough. I need to try to remember with Naraka's liaison too. So he's got at least 4 in there. Dune Desert Planet, that would have been a 5th. Yeah, I wonder if he could have bought Worm Riders with an early pass. Is this going to be a secure contract? Oh, he takes it back into hand. He is going to do an early reveal. But we see a dagger there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think he's doing an early reveal because he's afraid other players are going to buy the Worm Riders out from underneath him, particularly Scott K with a high council seat, which I think is a fair concern. He is giving up an action to make sure that he gets Worm Riders, and Worm Riders is sort of pretty good for him as he's set up for it. So I can see why he'd need to make that early pass, but that is an expensive card pickup. I'm a little on the fence about whether I'm a fan of an early pass for that or not. The problem is that the rest of the row is really crappy and it just doesn't give a lot in the way of options. But I think that if he had used his dagger at the Hall of Oratory 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, he could have bought a Chome Directorship. So he could then have decided whether he wanted Worm Riders if it was still available or a Chome Directorship as like his consolation prize. Chome Directorship's not exciting to get right at the beginning because it just kind of clogs up your deck a little bit. It doesn't really give you any faction access, and it's a card that you often want to be trashing. But even still, I think getting that little bit of extra value, the extra troop, that's the kind of thing I like to do. But I'm also only mediocre at this game, so certainly let me know in the comments what you think, what your line would have been in this situation. I think Scott made a really interesting choice, and there were actually a couple interesting places that he could have gone with it. So early pass for Worm Riders, which is what he did. Hall of Oratory with the dagger, so he could open up either Chome Directorship or Worm Riders if it was still available, or something else entirely. This looks like a reconnaissance to head over to a city spot. Maybe, sure, Siege Taber, get himself some water back. I think that's respectable. Now the question is whether he pushes in the second troop. And I think probably yes. I think Scott K has almost pushed him into a position where he's really incentivized to do so. A little bit of a bummer for Alec to watch. That's actually almost... I said that I recorded this before, but I do not remember that exchange. But that played out almost exactly how we said. That's how it goes. That's one of the dynamics with this sort of like slow-mo bidding mechanic that is combat in this game. Looks like we're going to get maybe some extra support from the Beast. He'll probably push in an extra troop here. Oh, 2 extra troops here. He's tired of this nonsense. I think that seems like an unnecessary additional push. I think he could just get away with just the 1. So I think he's overcharging himself a little bit here. He's going to end up paying 4 troops for an intrigue card and however many spice it is. I can't read it, and I don't have all the cards memorized. Looks like we do indeed have 6 persuasion for Scott K, who's probably a bit bummed to have seen that line from Scott L in terms of the Worm Riders. So he goes ahead and picks up Imperial Spy, which I like, and then throws in some Arrakis Liaisons along the way. Does he just pick up 1 or did he pick up 2? I couldn't quite tell. Well, he picked up 1 or 2 of them. I think on this board that's now completely crap, assassination mission coming in to fill in, those liaisons are going to be a big difference. You're going to want to be picking them up because it's going to be the way that people are going to be buying those Spice Must Flows later, just having that 2 persuasion repeatedly. So it's definitely awkward. It's not exciting. But if you were able to, jam Research Station and draw a bunch of cards and turn those 2 persuasion guys into victory points, that is one of the ways that you can go. You only need to score 9 points in a 4-player game. So, and 4 of those points are easy friendship points. You're looking for essentially 5 flex points in a 4-player game. So every point really matters here. David's going to pick himself up a liaison as well. I think that's maybe his 3rd in total or something like that. Alec here is the only one with a 3rd action at this point. I think that if he had faction access, that'd be the way to go. I mean, if he's got fold space, which looks like what he does have, if I saw that card correctly. And he's going to keep on pushing up the fold space here. It's got lots and lots of options, throws more fold spaces into his deck, and he is indeed going for that beast bonus of the alliance so that his ring is going to be 2 troopers instead of otherwise. But imagine if this had been secrets instead of fold space. I mean, I guess he couldn't take as many actions on the track because he used the fold space to play onto the track. But that's tough. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about Beast using fold spaces to essentially just kind of accelerate into themselves. And with the extra action of the Swordmaster, that's kind of cool. He's picking up a worker and using another fold space action to go again. I do think it's a mistake to head on to Carthag here. He should use it to be moving up his faction access. $2 from the Emperor or secrets. That's I think better than an extra troop that he doesn't need and an intrigue card. I mean, intrigue cards are great, don't get me wrong, but compare this to going to the Bene Gesserit spies, just 1 extra troop, which the Beast is good at getting troops for half a victory point. So I'm not a huge fan of that play on his part. And he's drawn extra cards with that fold space, but I guess that's 4 cards in hand. Yeah, he's not going to be able to buy very much exciting stuff with this. So I think it's going to be some liaisons for him, and that's it. There's one of them. The only card of real excitement in Alec's deck right now is, Diplomacy, of course, and the Gunthopter. So I'm curious to see if he leans into buying some of these. The liaisons are a lot less exciting when you don't have High Council seat, because it's the combo of drawing extra cards, having those liaisons, and High Council seat that usually can get you to the magic number of 9 for buying those spice must flows for victory points. So just putting in the liaisons in the deck without getting that high council support can lead to just sort of not having as many options, particularly faction access options. And this is going to be a game where people are going to really struggle with that faction access. So maybe people aren't going to get all their free points. Die. And now we've just got tons of spice sitting in play. Multiple players that can go to Highliner action space. Ooh, a pretty exciting battle here. I don't remember exactly. Oh, they just tapped it. So thanks for the pointing out for me, Scott, that's the Imperial Basin. That's, I think, the best flag one because a reward of a spice over a reward of $1 is really nice. And that Imperial Basin is just a good spot. Right now it's 2 spice for no resources. So it's just a great spot to head if you've got that Dune Desert planet clogging up your hand. I think it's a commonly taken action at least every other turn, which is going to just incidentally accrue a few extra spice over the course of the game. So on turn 3, is it now? Turn 4? It's turn 4 now. There's enough time between now and the end of the game that I think it's a great conflict to fight in. So I think Alec is the one who's going to want to take the most advantage of this. Wouldn't be surprised to see Scott L push in the 1 troop here, try to get a water. And he will use Helena here to scoop Chome Directorship off the board. I see that he's got at least one convincing argument in hand, so he's got to be considering, what he wants to... I assume this is not a hate draft, and he actually is planning on purchasing this, but I don't know what his card situation in hand looks like about if he has to jump through some hoops to make that happen, or if he has to do another early pass. It's not a card that he really wants to burn at this stage. And it's interesting to kind of look back, like imagine if this was a Kwisatz. In fact, if Kwisatz had been in play, he could have afforded it last turn with the Hall of Oratory line that I'd suggested. So going all the way back to the beginning of the game, I don't know that burning the Kwisatz was the right call. Smuggler's Thopter here as a flip is super interesting for Alec. It's a pretty crap card for anybody that isn't him. So I think he's pretty happy to see something of value, show up for him on the board. And I don't think other people are terribly incentivized to do it. Thufir, I think, is David's main advantage. He's got that faction access in a way that other folks don't have. He's got a ton of resources. He has the option of going to Highliner, and it's a good battle for it. But I would do that on the second action. He doesn't super need to be concerned about it. Well, I guess actually Baron could do it. So, I could see Highlinering for this action here. It's a good battle to win. Pick up just a pile of water. That's a tough call. I don't think... Definitely not Hardy Warriors. I guess you could get some still suits that'd be fine. He's got a bunch of fine options, but, frankly, in a lot of ways, the ideal sequence for him this turn is like Secure Contract, Swordmaster, and then Thufir to do anything. But it sort of depends on if he had the cards in hand to be able to do that. He can get away with 7 for the Swordmaster thanks to Leto's discount ability. But he's going to go ahead and Highliner right away. The thing I don't love about this is that it's a little hard to tell how many troops he needs to push in. Alec is going behind him in turn order, has 4 troops in reserve. So how hard is he going to fight for this is the question. And I think, as David, if you want to win this, you have to push all 5 in. I think otherwise you're just going to see the beast coming in behind you and going, gangbusters over the top. 4 is a pretty good push in because it makes it so that if Alec wants to win this combat, it's going to be a really, really big fight. And 2 water is second place isn't bad. So if I'm in Alec's position, I'm asking myself the question of do I want to fight this, or do I want to kind of just put in 1 or 2 guys, try to get that second or third place and come back for a different battle later. So I do like 4. I think 5 would be a little bit... It's tough. You don't want to just waste resources. I think if he puts in 5, he's just scaring other players away. But it is a victory point, and he doesn't want to win second place with 4 troops. Looks like we've got that card that lets him pay a couple spice and immediately put that card. I don't know if it goes on top of his deck or in his hand, but one of those intrigues that lets you buy something immediately. And we flip out a Spice Hunter to just complete the crapification of our top row here. And I'm sure I've got people in the comments or who are watching this game right now being like, this is why you need the expansion with the card flush. And I don't disagree with you. I think I've been playing some Dune Uprising, and I got to say the cards in that game are just generally better across the board. Even the cheap ones that are crappy are not quite as crappy as the crappy ones are here. I think that makes a big difference. We're going to see how much Alec pushes in here to determine if it's going to be a fight, and he's going to push in 3, which means he's coming for blood. I think that if he was going for second place, he'd just have pushed in 2. But yeah, he's looking to come in over top of David now. Yeah, it's really awkward. These two players bumping into each other. I feel like David and Alec have been bumping into each other in the conflict space here. And that's a losing proposition for David, with Alec having more workers, agents, and having him be after him in turn order. Scott K has, let's see, he's got a pile of spice, so he could be looking to like conspire, just kind of collect a bunch of stuff. He could sort of set himself up to be the player that has both the Swordmaster and the High Council by doing that. Or maybe he's saving them for a future Highliner. Oh, a space travel here. Yeah, that's a card you got to play early because it's only going to let him take that action once. I think, by the way, he's supposed to place his worker before drawing the card. Not that he could place it anywhere else, but I do think that's technical sequencing there. And yeah, as I said, the faction access is a little tough, so this full space card is actually going to be decent, just given how crappy those things are. And it looks like Scott does indeed have to do some work to grab that Chum Directorship card. Not ideal, but also not the worst, because Chum Directorship is just really good. You could argue that it's actually better than a Spice Mist Flow, because like I said, I usually treat each faction thing as a half a point, and it's 4 half a points, so that's 2 points for those of us who are amazing at math. And it usually doesn't work out to be exactly like that, but it's almost always going to be worth at least 1 point. So it's just a cheaper Spice Mist Flow. All right. This could be a couple bucks, I guess, in the secure contract. I guess he could throw some water at getting some spice, but they're not the most exciting, and he doesn't have any troops in garrison to push out. Yeah, and here he's at 7, but he's out of agents for the round, so that's a little bit of bummer and sequencing that he wouldn't be able to have gotten the Swordmaster this turn with an action, but maybe he doesn't even have green access. I guess we'll have to see when he does his reveal turn. And now we're going to see the Beast punishing the early Highliner as he's going to come in over top of the 4 troops, which is just pretty painful. And that 5th troop is gone because I guess I missed it, but I think the Beast played Gunthopter and blew up something from everybody's garrison. So yeah, people are just not incentivized to leave 1 troop in garrison, as that Gunthopter is going to take advantage. I mean, I think he got maximum value shooting every other player once. And there he goes, pushing up to 5 with the Still Suits play. I really like this for him. It's a faction access. He knows that David can't go again, so he's basically put himself into a locked position to win this combat. It was a little bit expensive, but it's a combat that I think is worth an extra troop or 2. So I approve of the decision there. And David is just getting browbeaten everywhere in this game. I think it's one of those things where that I think about Dune Imperium that is counterintuitive, is that it's easy to treat it like it's a Euro game, and it is kind of a Euro game, but most Euro games, you get your advantages by getting little edges, being very efficient throughout the course of this game. And a lot of times in this game, when you're trying to be efficient, other players have the opportunity to then come over top of you because of the competitive nature of some of the actions or the bids or things like that, people choosing to pass early and things like that. So you can't just do everything in terms of efficiency, because players who are, going to beeline on a certain aspect of the game are going to be able to take advantage of that, and box you out. And that's, I think, what we've kind of seen happening with David in this game. He's a ring winner of Ticket to Ride, I believe, in his first year, and Raw in the second year. So clearly a player that, knows how to take little edges in those games, those kinds of games, and turn it into something bigger. And in Dune Imperium, there's a lot of go big or go home aspects to the actions here. Scott K is going to prolong his round here by picking up Mentat. And, one of the things that I was given feedback about when I was getting better about this, people on this channel commenting, is that I undervalued Mentat. So I think we're seeing the same kind of thing in this game. It's just tough to throw those $2 at that repeatedly. But if you think about it, if you're taking the Mentat 4 times, that's 4 third actions, kind of like the Swordmaster, which is $8 for those third actions, and the Mentat draws you cards along the way. So it's actually a pretty good value proposition for players. So they should be grabbing the Mentat pretty much as often as possible at this stage if you can afford it. A little awkward for the Baron because it clears him out of cash. And he just reshuffled his deck, and I think he's got Gurney Halleck in hand and Space Travel in play. So it's a bummer because those are the 2 good cards in his deck. And it's going to be even longer till he draws them now because he just drew. So I have to assume that he's drawing for something really important there. Yeah. I think we... Oh yeah, Scott bought his Chome directorship while I was rambling on, so he's moved up on all those tracks and shot up in the victory points because of it, which makes total sense. And looks like we're going to grab a Spice Hunter for David. He's got a fair number of liaisons, so he can probably access that Fremen Bond. But it's not the most exciting pickup. However, it does also have Fremen access, which he does care about. If he can sort of draft off of Scott and then immediately faction access to get himself an alliance, like that's actually a pretty nice 1-2 punch. But draft off, I mean using the ring to follow in after him. So he could do something kind of sneaky. It takes a couple plays, but if Scott doesn't have the faction access, it could give him the opportunity to steal that alliance from right out from underneath him. Little awkward for Alec that he is can't play the Smuggler Sopter. Oh, because does he not have water? He does have water. I'm wondering why he doesn't use the Smuggler Sopter and head over to the Haga Basin, draw 2 cards, get a couple spice. But instead he passes. He gets the Bene Gesserit sister here. Right? He has the water there, right? Yeah, I don't think he got it from the pass action, so I think that's what I would have done. I just don't love an early pass. Especially here, we see that Scott's, the early pass actually doesn't put anything, it doesn't give Alec anything in terms of an advantage here. Although maybe he just wanted the extra 1 to buy the Bene Gesserit sister who's tired of buying some crap. And we see a Conspire here. With the diplomacy from our Baron. And what do we have here? 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so the card draw from the Mentat, I think might have been the thing that pushes him into the position. That's really interesting though. So I wonder what card he drew off the top. It wasn't Gurney because we hadn't seen him earlier. I mean, if he drew a convincing argument, that's insanely lucky. But he just played a card that was 1 persuasion, right? So, I mean, in theory, he could have, if he had actually drawn into a dagger by taking the Mentat action, he would have shot himself in the foot, actually prevented himself from being able to. Yeah, but I guess he used the dagger to go there. That's interesting. I'm trying to to think of what he drew, like what was in his hand, like why he needed to draw the extra card with the Mentat versus like just straight up taking that Conspire action. Like, could he have still had the 9 to buy the worm? I'm having a hard time rolling back like what it was that he could have drawn. I guess I would have had to know what cards he'd already played from the prior turn. Yeah, it could have just been a really lucky draw with a convincing argument or a liaison or anything that has 2 persuasion on it off the top for him, which would be pretty spicy. So that spice with slow is going to give him an extra victory point. Seems good. Alec here is going to win that conflict and claim the Imperial Basin. And we are moving into round 5. I'm going to take a quick pause. All right. Let's head into round 5. So roughly this is the halfway point of the game. I think some games end on round 7, but I would say round 8 seems to be kind of the norm. And then every once in a while, I think you creep into round 9s, but that 7, 8, 9 thing is pretty standard. Sort of like terraforming Mars, I guess, with the expansion, the prelude. All right, so we got Thufir here grabbing a couple dollars for David, who moves up the blue marker, but should be moving up the green marker. And gives himself a few bucks. I don't think he's concerned about anyone getting in the way of him getting a Swordmaster, so that looks like it's going to be... Looks like it's going to be his thing. A little awkward for Duke Leto on turn 5 to be getting his first either Swordmaster or a High Council seat. I think that's sort of a indication of how much David's just sort of been stymied throughout the course of this game. And then gotten into these sort of like mini squabbles that have distracted from, I think, a more powerful overall game plan. We've got the beast here has cleared out his garrison, so he's no longer the big threat. And he just loves going to Carthag, picking up those intrigue cards. I mean, it's a good spot. I think it makes a lot of sense. I didn't see what card he used to do that, but if he just put it away, was it a fold space? I think if he fold space for Carthag, that was a mistake. As I've already said, I think that it's important for him to be getting those faction accesses for these points, but I might have just misseen, but I think he just put it back into that central pile there, so I have to assume that was a fold space that he played. Scott here, almost showing us a bit of his hand, but we don't quite get a good grasp, so I'm curious what he's thinking about. He looks like he's sitting on 5 coins right there. So a line for him this turn could be going and grabbing the Swordmaster, but on turn 5, like, it's already far enough into the game that it may no longer be worth it to do that. So he's gonna do a little deck reshuffle here. That's great, because I was just talking about how I thought it was unfortunate that Gurney and Space Travel are there. And I'm sure this is not intentional, but I can't help but notice that the cards that were one way were the planets were facing one way and the discard pile was facing the other way. I hate these not double-sided backs of cards, because the like way that they can mix. If you watched me playing any of my Arc Nova games, I was constantly correcting the discard pile. I really want them all to face the same way. I really much prefer card design where the back is transversal. There's a certain phrase for a card that looks the same 180 degrees around. I guess the art just generally looks prettier if it's not, but something about poker cards that is always going to be wonderful is that they look the same one way as they do the other. I think that's really, really, I like it. And here we get a ring play. We'll pick up some intrigue. We'll throw one guy into the conflict here. I think this would be one where I would put 2 in, but maybe he's just trying to limp for that water and wants to leave some extra troops in the garrison, figuring that the beast is going to come over top of him. But he doesn't have anything in garrison right now, so it's not clear that will happen. And he's still thinking. Maybe he's got another intrigue card he's debating whether he wants to play or not. Went to Air Keen there, so he's drawn 2 cards this turn. So his hand size right now, after having taken an action, is actually larger than it was before. So with that reshuffle, he might be going for another Spice Must Flow this turn. Looks like we also had a draw here. That must be the card that's like a draw 1 and you can immediately trash it if you like. And we're going to throw some water and pick up a couple spice. This is okay, but I feel like Haga Basin's got the better ratio. I guess he's just trying to get up to that magic number of 6, so he's got that highliner access, which is fair. All right, we got a ring here, which I hope means that he's going to be picking up some spice. Nope. Oh, of course, yeah. He needs to go upgrade his swordsman, but without the spice, it unfortunately means that I think that he did not get to use that ring's power. So I think that's maybe the second or third time that the ring has not been used to advance on the track. Really, kind of making a blank. I think that in a lot of ways, David would have had a better time if he was playing with like Count Ilban or something this game rather than Duke Leto, because the ring's been used so few times that just getting those extra dollars and having the extra cards from Ilban might have helped a little bit more than what Leto is doing for him. Beast is happy to pick up a couple spice with his water there, and he must have played a ring because he gained a troop for that, which he pushes into the conflict. And I think that's that's the right call. I thought Scott should have pushed in a second troop. So nice for Alec that he manages to come in over top there. Is that maybe the same card that Scott L just played? Scott K draws one, decides whether to trash it or not. We're missing something. Oh, this is a part where they go for a rules look. I'm going to pause while they figure out whatever it is they're looking up. All right, here we go. And Scott is playing a dagger to pick up that Mentat again, which I think is a great choice for him here. So I think the rules question was about whether the card that gets trashed is public knowledge or not. And I actually didn't even stick around to see what the ruling was, because I don't think at our high level here that's something that matters. It should matter to you if you're playing the game, and I think it's absolutely worth kind of clarifying those things. I'm actually not even sure that it's a rule that's detailed out in the rule book. Or if it's something that's more like a tournament policy type of thing. But at the like high level, us trying to pay attention to 4 people, we don't really care that much about the minutia, I think. So we're going to see a diplomacy play here from Scott. He might go to Fremen just to get that alliance point, and the alliance bonus is there since he's out of water. But instead, he's actually going to come in up over top with the highliner here and push into the conflict. I think that this is an interesting time to do this because he's got, Baron possibly coming in behind. Well, Baron doesn't have access to water, so no hardy warriors for him. And he just goes whole hog, pushing all 6 into the conflict, saying, I want those 2 extra bumps. I'm going to be claiming alliances left and right. He actually might be in a situation where at a certain point claiming those extra alliance movements are not going to be so important to him because he's got the Chom directorship and he's going to win this conflict here, I think, short of any absolute surprises. I don't know that he needed to push all 5 in. I think that Scott at most can push 3 more in because he doesn't have access to hardy warriors, and frankly it's a little awkward for him to do that because he does need to trigger Masterstroke at some point in time, and so leaving the extra guys in reserve so that he can use hardy warriors is important for him. So I think that Scott L could have gotten away probably with just pushing 4 in. I don't think that Alec has a way of pushing in that many. He's got no guys in reserve. So, I mean, maybe it's a little bit greedy because also like Alec is holding onto a grip of intrigue cards and Scott just didn't want to play with it. I was just talking about how David didn't go over the top enough. So 6 feels like a lot. It feels like an overkill for what the circumstances are here. And it does feel a little goofy to throw in 5, knowing that a Gunthopter could be played at any time to blow up his garrison. But we do currently see the Gunthopter on the top of Alec's discard pile. So I don't know. 6 is a lot. 6 is a lot to push in, but maybe it just isn't. He's just figuring he's not going to be doing a lot of conflicting for the rest of the game here. Here we see diplomacy from David. He's got so much water, but it's not the most exciting time to hardy warriors. But at least it moves him up on that track, maybe gets him into that alliance. I don't know. I think that if I was him, I would have considered something like a fold space just for that extra access option and the victory point, unless he's thinking he's going to get more water for Highliner action later in the game. I've already mentioned that I think that the secret spot has been kind of underplayed this game, that just getting those intrigue, moving up the Bene Gesserit track. It's surprising how very few movements we have up on that track in this game. David just wants to make sure that he uses that water, throws a couple troops into play, but doesn't even employ them. I mean, he can convert that water into research station stuff. He's got a lot of Arrakis liaisons in his deck, so he can maybe turn that into some Spice Mist flows later, but he does really need to get a High Council seat if he wants to try to go that path, which I don't think is too far out of his range if he wanted to try and do something like that. One secure contract is enough money for him to get there. Wow, and so Scott does indeed have enough to buy another Spice Must Flow. He has bought a lot of 2 value things and clearly prioritized drawing cards in some ways, and I still can't help but feel like he's actually drawn decently to make that work, because he's drawn, let's see, he's drawn 1, 2, plus 2 cards. He's drawn 4 cards this turn. He used 2, so 7 cards. And we know one of those, I think one of those that he just revealed was a dagger, although maybe that was a dagger from his play space. So 7 cards that he's revealing with. Okay, actually, I guess it doesn't need to be that many. Yeah, he essentially turned 2 intrigue cards and his actions for the turn into an extra Spice Must Flow. So that makes sense. I mean, I usually don't like those intrigue cards that draw a card, but by accumulating them and kind of playing them all in the same round, Scott manages to leverage that into a victory point, which I think is really clever. Well done. Scott L, I think, took a pass action. I didn't even see if he purchased anything. Maybe he picked up a liaison or something. See, David here is going to pick up a Fatakin Death Commando. The only slot that leaves kind of any mediocre cards even left. Death Commando's not exciting at this stage of the game. That trashing ability is really nice early, but at this stage you're kind of just hoping to Fremen bond him, I guess, for the swords, but that's not the most exciting. And we'll see Alec here pick up a Duncan Idaho. We'll slide a Spice Smugglers into play, completing again our crapification of the track. I mean, that card's actually okay, and there are a few players that I think could take advantage of Spice Smugglers, but not like, it's not the most exciting option for sure. I think green and blue, so David and Scott L, or sorry, green and yellow, so David and Scott K are the most likely to be able to take advantage of Spice Smugglers, just as a way to move up on that Spacing Guild track and get that point without needing to head back into the guild. You could argue that Alec is in that same kind of situation, but Alec's got the spice now to Highliner, or I guess he doesn't. I guess he's 1 spice off of Highlinering, but I imagine that's how he's going to get his last function bump there. And I think that's one of the things that's a little bit awkward about the Beast choosing to go up that track in particular to get to the top, because, you know, you want to be Highlinering and you're hoping that when you Highliner, you're also getting the value of the victory points that you're moving up there. Looks like we had a little bathroom cut as we ended round 5 there, which ended up in a victory for Scott, who then takes the Fremen Alliance and grabbed a victory point somewhere, but I think it was up in the Empire track. But I think he maybe should have gone up on the Bene Gesserit track to get himself closer to that Alliance space there, because then it would be 1 action on the Emperor track and 1 action on the Bene Gesserit. Actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, I don't mind the Emperor take it all, because then he could essentially proceed to take 2 actions on the Bene Gesserit track. People don't seem to really care about that spot at all, so that could be another venue for him getting an extra victory point. So I mean, he's crushing right now with 7 points, but the problem is that he has basically no points available on the board. Maybe Bene Gesserit if he moves up on that track 2 times, and then other than that, he's looking to buy things because he's got no Sword Master. He's got Worm Riders, which will help him in a fight. In fact, if he could, I think trying to steal the victory point on this turn 6 as people kind of build up for turn 7 might be really important. But Alec doesn't really care. He's going to head to the research station, draw some cards, cash in that water, and push something out. That's an interesting choice. I mean, I guess he's got the 2 water to use, but it's unlikely that he's going to get enough persuasion there to pick up a Spice Must Flow with no High Council and frankly a kind of cruddy deck from what I remember of what he's picked up so far. So maybe just really limited options and action access to take the research station, but it's not usually the way you want to be using research station. Like, you're hoping to segue that into a point, I think. And David and Scott L are probably really sad to see that action from him, but so it goes. Imperial Basin's sitting with 1 spice on it, so it's kind of a curiosity of who will choose to take it this turn. You want to get that free spice, so 2 spice total, but then you give Alec an extra spice, or Alex could take it to get the 3 spice. Like, that's a pretty valid choice for him as well. Alec has got a long way to go in terms of victory points. He just has a lot of faction access that he's not scored any points for yet. And I think he's actually only won the 1 battle. But if he can get access to factions and score those points, he can go shooting up. So he needs to win conflicts and move up on those tracks. So doing that dance is going to be challenging for him. Scott K is in second place right now off of the back of a couple Spice Must Flows, which, then if we look over his faction access, like, he's got a lot of faction access points still available to him, frankly. Like, he's only gotten 1 of them so far. And so is he going to be able to get those moves up? Scott here draws a card. Again, I'm pretty sure he's supposed to have assigned his worker before drawing another card. But that he should be thinking to himself every time he's going out to those faction access spots, it's a half a victory point, and he's got himself 2 points from the Spice Must Flows, which, of those extra points you need to make, he's made a lot of them so far. I'm sure he's also considering conflict, and I think we're going to see our master stroke here. We're going to pay a water. He's going to push in 2 troops, 4 troops in total. That's going to be a victory point if he wins this conflict. And that's nice, because I think other players might be thinking, I want to set up for turn 7. That's, I like going for a turn 6 battle. People are reticent to go hard on this because they want to set up for the more rewards that are about to be next turn. And this is going to be also a point for the Fremen access. So Scott is making his push. He sees that he's got those 2 Spice Must Flows, and he's going to make a push. He's going to reveal his Master Stroke, which is going to continue. So that looks like a Fremen and something else. Oh, maybe he did already reveal them. It was a Fremen and the Emperor. So that Fremen point, I see. Okay, so he had no Fremen points, and that moved him up to that victory point on the Fremen spot, and moves him ever closer to the Emperor alliance, which is great. Helena here, I mentioned that Scott L was going to be sad, but actually doesn't care at all, because Helena lets him just draw some extra cards. I think he is drawing cards so that he can draw into a Spice Must Flow purchase this turn. That is, I think, pretty clearly what Helena is going for, particularly since he used a Worm Riders to do that action. He's not looking to battle here, and 2 spice is nice as a reward, but it's a little bit of a bummer to not use the 7 swords here. Imagine that he created a couple troops and threw them into this conflict. If he puts 2 troops into this conflict plus 7 swords, like, he could come over the top of Scott, who's his main contender right now, and steal the victory point right away from him. So that would be another way that he could go, rather than going for the Spice Must Flow. And I can't help but wonder what options he might have been able to do that with. I guess there's not a lot of way for him to get those troops. He kind of would just have to have had a bunch of blue cards and do the Siege Carthag Arakeen kind of thing. But if he had blue access, multiple blue access, that could be an alternate option that he considered this round. Just depends on what his hand looked like in terms of what his access options were, and how good his persuasion is. Like if his hand's already pretty close to getting a Spice Must Flow, picking up those 3 cards to kind of make sure he gets the rest of the way makes a really big difference. The awkward thing for him now is, I guess diplomacy, he can still go on Ben and Gesserit spots. What do we got here? 3, 4, 5, dagger. I can't see the bottom half of his hand. Here's a reconnaissance. Yep, Arakeen seems like a fine choice. That or Carthag. And then we could see maybe a push of a troop or 2 here. Seems a little goofy to push in 3. He's debating whether Alec is going to fight him. The thing is, second place is a water, which he doesn't need. So I think just pushing in 1 and letting Alec do whatever, if he wants to fight for it or not, just getting the spice is what's important to him. Who cares if he gets the extra water? Whereas the extra troop might matter to him in the long run. And Alec here, despite the fact that he probably is going to highliner later, is going to move into the fold space location so that he can supercharge his Beast Ring ability, which is all good and fine, except for when he gets that 5th space on the Spacing Guild. It's going to feel a little goofy while his other faction alliances are just looking pretty anemic. Scott's going to use his Imperial Spy here to push all the way up and grab that alliance token, and he went from being several points behind Scott L to just on his tail, and that's because he had all those unrealized points. He still has unrealized points in terms of friendships. He has 1 very easy point to pick up under the Spacing Guild here, so that's looking pretty nice for him. So we see 2 daggers in hand here and a Chome Directorship. So it's 2, 3, 4, 5. So that might be that we just saw Helena actually. Yeah, wow. He just has no good faction access. His deck is really crappy, right? The Chome Directorship is no good for doing any of that stuff. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I think short of drawing, I mean, if he draws like a liaison or something right here, then he makes it to that 9 if I counted correctly, but it's a little bit awkward. I mean, he couldn't have been at 8. If he was at 8, he would have used a dagger and headed to the Hall of Oratory and taken the guaranteed thing. But I'm going to say from his pretty serious face here that he didn't draw what he needed, which I think was probably... well, it couldn't have been a convincing argument, because if he paid 1 with the ring, it's 1 fewer persuasion with the ring, I don't think there was anything that he could have drawn. Yeah. A little bit awkward. Yeah, I think in retrospect, I don't know what 3 cards he drew off the top. If he drew Chome Directorship, dagger, like that's quite a bummer. But seeing the 2 daggers and the worm in his hand, I guess he has no way of like getting soldiers either, because he didn't have blue access. He just had a bunch of yellow access. Could maybe, nope, the spice came from the Worm Riders. Yeah, he just didn't have good action spaces this turn. And that's kind of the thing about, he bought cards early, power play, Chome Directorship, that put him into a great position, but they just made his deck pretty crappy here. Alec pushing in for second here is quite a bummer for both David and for Alec. It's just everything got more expensive for the both of them. And Alec just gets wild amounts of spice thanks to his Imperial Basin connections. So now he can do anything related in Spice World. We get a reveal here for 2, 4, 6, 7. Wow. Scott drew into 7 again. That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, he certainly has a significant number of 2 persuasion cards in his deck, but this has worked out very, very nicely for him. This round, he must have drawn an extra card with an intrigue or something, because I'm trying to figure out how he has 4 cards in hand. Yeah, maybe I missed an intrigue card play somewhere or something, but yeah, 4 cards in hand is 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's another Spice Must Flow, and that puts him up. What a huge turn for Scott K. I wonder what the conversation is here. I'm not listening to them chit chatting because I find it very distracting while I'm trying to focus on the conversation. But it's going on for a minute because remember, this is plus 50% speed. So they've been talking for a second here. Scott L's next. I think he's about to pass for the round. Let me put on a quick pause just to see how long this goes for. Okay, I solved it. So Scott drew an extra card because he'd played a fold space earlier in the turn, so that's how he has 4. Scott K did, and then they were discussing something about something that was at the other table, and then finally Scott L forgot to reserve something with his ring, so they were having a quick discussion about that, which I think they settled on doing nothing here. But unfortunately, he does not have enough there thanks to the Trome directorship and the daggers. Looks like he's at 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I think he drew that liaison off of the. I think he drew the liaison off of the air keen from the earlier fan. So, because we know that he had the 2 daggers and 3 coins in hand. So I think he had no way really of drawing into unless he had something like Peter or Jessica in his deck, of drawing of playing the. God, I'm stumbling over my words. Of playing Spice Must Flow thanks to the persuasion in his hand. So. That early research station just didn't do the work. I didn't see quite what he had before that, but yeah, rough round for Scott L as he kind of just stalls out, and Scott K ends up scoring, I think, 4 points. It's very likely that he's going to win this conflict, but we'll see if the Beast comes in with a couple extra troops here. David is going to start cashing in his water to get some kind of inefficient spice bonuses. He's probably angling towards picking up a pile of spice. Could be actually that he's getting both the 3 spice and the 2 spice with his next 2 actions, so that he can actually highliner before Alec, which would be a real nightmare for Alec. But frankly, David needs to make moves too. I mean, he's so far behind, and this is kind of one of the problems that happens, I think, in this game, is that generally when you're behind, you look to combat to be the way to fix the problem, and then players start scrabbling with each other, and it ends up being players in 3rd and 4th place that are fighting with each other rather than fighting against players in 1st and 2nd, who I think both Scott K and Scott L are going to find their way across the finish line here with Spice Must Flows rather than combat victories. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways we're seeing for Scott L the lack of infrastructure, right? The only thing he has is High Council seat, and not that great of a deck is coming back to haunt him a little bit here. And it's going to be a little bit trickier for him to figure out his way across the finish line. Scott K, on the other hand, now has a pretty crappy deck because he's filled it full of all these Spice Must Flows. I think he's got 3 now. So he's got a lot of dead draws in there, which I think are going to get in his way. Something to consider, and I think everybody should be considering going to selective breeding to be trashing out those almost do nothing cards if they have the opportunity to do so. There's really not been a lot of trashing in this game, cards that haven't really supported it, but no one's gone to selective breeding. We've just seen a lot of spice funneled into the highliner situation of the game. A couple daggers here for David. Wonder actually, where does that put us? Oh, is that a multi-way tie? Oh no, Alec looks like he came out on top with probably a gunthopter situation. I didn't quite see on his reveal, but it looks like Alec is then going to walk away with the victory here. So Scott K actually not going to get that extra point, which I think makes a big difference here, and it's good on Alec and David for putting some pressure on Scott K, who is definitely in, I think, the commanding position right now. I'm trying to figure out where we are. Maybe we're in the combat and Scott K is deciding whether he wants to play an intrigue card. He might be trying to debate whether it makes sense to play an intrigue card and push himself into second or something like that. But it looks like we're not going to get anything getting played, so Alec's going to walk away with the victory here. Boom. That's a point. That's a really big deal for him. Unfortunately for him, looks like he won't be able to highliner into the turn 7 conflict because David has set himself up to be able to highliner into the turn 7 conflict. So his collection of all this spice is becoming a little bit of excessive, actually. I mean, he'll be able to use it probably on the subsequent turn, but it kind of depends on what happens, what flips, and what spice becomes available. Scott K's first this round is round 7. And that could be something I think that Scott L could be considering, like if he's going first next turn. So if he manages to get himself up to 6 spice, he goes first on turn 8. He could be grabbing a couple essential victory points. I mean, highliner is not a guaranteed victory, and both the Scots are in the challenging position of not having the swordsman, so they don't get to kind of go last or have as many actions to push troops in. But having just a few troops in garrison plus a highliner action for Scott would put him in a pretty commanding position to win conflict number 8. Now, obviously, we're at conflict number 7, but I think one of the things about conflicts in this game, particularly the bigger conflicts here, is you sort of start going in lurches, like where you need to think, okay, I'm not going to be winning anything this turn, but I am thinking of doing something next turn. This game, I don't think, has a lot of looking 3 rounds ahead, or maybe even 2 rounds ahead, but looking forward to the next round, even at the beginning of this round, I think does really matter because you have such a limited number of actions. Scott K could be saying the same thing to himself, but frankly, there's no way he's going to be the one grabbing highliner on turn 8. So I think that he's probably going to want to lean more into his deck. The fact that he has a lot of 2 persuasion cards. That looks like he's got a couple. It looks like he got a spice must flow in his hand there, which, like, maybe a selective breeding here with his 4 spice lets him draw into some more cards so that he could potentially draw some more persuasion, trash out that spice must flow so that he's not drawing it on future hands. Although he is at the top of his deck right now, it'd be a lot more exciting if it wasn't his discard, admittedly. No one's sitting on 2 water anymore. Okay, a space travel here. I think that's great. That's a victory point for him, and a fold space in case he gets through his deck. I respect that a lot. And I think Scott has made a case for me that I've maybe undervalued space travel a little bit. Like I don't think it's a bad card. I think when he bought it, I didn't think it was a bad card, but I don't think it's a good card either. I don't think it's a pass early 4 card, but he's gotten a lot of mileage out of it. So maybe I'm wrong even about that. We get a trash of a Chome directorship here with a selective breeding. Scott L will take advantage and draw a couple cards here. One of them's a convincing argument. I didn't see what the first one was, but that might get him a little bit closer to that necessary spice must flow. And I would be surprised to not see a highliner action here from David. I guess the only way is if he doesn't have that faction access. But I believe he's got at least 2 cards in his deck that let him get there, and Thufir is the better of the ones that lets him get there. So he's going to push in for all 5, and Alec's having a laugh because he's been sitting on a heck amount of spice for a lot of turns, but it just really hasn't worked out. And that's how turn order goes. When you are last on turn 7, the odds that you're going to be the one who highliners is, in fact, the lowest. And here we go with the big push. Oh, Alec already has a troop in because this is a battle for the Imperial Basin, I see. No, you got to go with all 5. It's 2 victory points. David can't afford to not win this fight. But I guess he will play some cute Garrison games. I mean, he always has the chance to push more in if he's going to support it later. He is more or less broke of resources now. He's managed to use the giant caches of water. Nope, I lied. Highliner gives him some more water. What am I talking about? So Alec here's got to figure out a different plan. He's got a pile of coins, and I don't know that he has a way that high council seat is worthwhile. I think Mentatting here should be a way that he uses those coins right now. Gives himself some options to play later, unless he's racing for certain spaces, but I don't think that he necessarily is. Instead, he's going to rally troops, which I respect in the sense that he does need troops in his garrison. Scott K does have the coins to go there, but I still kind of feel like Mentat might be a more exciting spot. It's worked out nicely for Scott K, who could head over to Mentat right now if he wants. Oh, no, he can't because he has no play options in his hand. Wow, I think he's only got Dune Desert Planets and everything else doesn't let him go anywhere. Or is that a reconnaissance maybe at the top? So he's going to blue or yellow. Yeah, he's got limited options. If he's got blue, I foresee him going to Air Keen and drawing some cards. If he's got, 4 or 5, yeah, he's got 5 persuasion in hand there. Not a lot of options. A pretty bad hand for him, which makes sense. I think he drew really nicely last round to draw off of the fold space to draw enough to make sure that he bought the Spice Must Flow next turn. So he doesn't really have much to complain about in terms of having good or bad draws. But it is certainly the case that this turn is on the weaker side of actions. And he says, I'm not going to get Spice Must Flow, so give me some intrigue instead. I'll just spend this turn kind of acquiring some stuff. I wonder if he's going to push these troops in. I mean, I think this is the one where it's 5 spice for second and 3 spice for third. So just pushing in even 1 troop essentially tests Scott L and says, look, are you going to push any troops in? Because if you're not, I'm going to get 3 spice at the cost of 1 worker, which is a pretty great ratio. But then he has to ask himself the question of, am I going to have an opportunity to spend the spice? Because I've got Alec in front of me with gobs and gobs of spice. He's going to be the one who's going to be highlinering for sure. So maybe I don't even really care about having that extra 3 spice. And I'll save my troop. And that is what he says. I think I would have greedily pushed in 1 still. If only actually just to make it so that Scott can't push in 1 and grab it easy. But I don't know. It's tough to say. And Scott says, you know what? I don't do fighting. It's really awkward to have Worm Riders not helping you fight. Especially when he's got the Alliance, right? That's 7 swords. There's, a world where he pushes these in and can end up winning the conflict with +7 swords. Now, unfortunately, I think Alec is going to go over the top of David here, so I'm not sure that that's a thing that he can kind of count on. But Alec actually has time to watch and see, so he doesn't need to know. It could actually also be that the rest of Scott L's hand is the sufficient persuasion to buy a Spice Must Flow. And so in that case, he says, great, I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to grab my 2 spice thanks to these Worm Riders and get on. I think the fact that he's laid it out and hasn't even decided what action he's taken, I've now convinced myself that he does indeed have the 7 persuasion on the nose in the hand, and this is the card that needs to go out of his hand. So he's probably going to pass for a victory point, and he's just getting some extra stuff here. And I really like going to Siege Tabur for him because that gives him a second water so that he can research stations, so he can limp his way into another victory point on a Spice Must Flow. I think that's definitely where Helena in particular likes to be. All right. I think if David, I mean, he didn't push in 5 before, but do think he needs to defend his position. Oh, and we see the raw table wrapping up behind. Here's a diplomacy. Oh, he is going to apply pressure to Scott. This puts him in the position where he's going to tie up there, get his water back. And I have to assume if he's doing this because he's pushing in 3 troops. I mean, I think he is trying to take Scott L's victory point here. A little awkward doing this with Leto in this way. Oh, but he's going to leave all 3 in garrison. So I guess he's just finding a way to use his water. Man, interesting. I can't help but wonder if going to Emperor for victory point or secrets for an intrigue to defend the battle would have been a little bit better here. Because, in order for him to get that Fremen alliance, he can't do it with Duke Leto. Like, he's got to walk up it like a proper person. And by going up the Bene Gesserit, for instance, he would have made it so that he could use Duke Leto's ring to get the other point. But I guess the same is true for Emperor. I just think that he needs to spread a little bit more widely. I think he needs to play greedy if he's going to win this game. And it's very, very unlikely. But, yeah, I'm not sure that was the ideal spot for him. I guess he's angling to try to win this conflict and next round's conflicts, but I don't know that he has the gas to make that happen. I don't think there's any way that Alec is going to allow that to happen. Here we get a couple more troops, thanks to the Beast's Imperial Basin support, where he just picks up a few more spice as well to have a positively ridiculous amount of 10 spice now. And Scott's got a pretty crap reveal here. Please give me a spice, thanks to my worm bursting out of the ground, and I've got a couple bucks here. I think he just wants to increase the density of 2 persuasion cards in his deck. Pick up a couple liaisons, and that's that. At this point, the Spice Smugglers is not good for him. He doesn't need the bump on that track. He doesn't need the coins, really. Pretty low infrastructure game with 2 players on high council seat and 2 players on swordsman. I do think that's a reflection of like this game is going to end up going long, and I think it's pretty clear at this point that it is going to be going long. We are on turn 7. Yeah, we're on turn 7, and no one is winning this turn for sure. And it's not looking promising that someone's going to win next turn either. Though the Scots are both at 8 and could maybe get 2 points to limp into a turn 8 victory. All right, so now we see between David and Alec what happens next. And David has got one more play here if he wants to defend himself. I think, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that he needed to play greedy, but if he had like maybe pushed those 2 hardy warriors in, Alec might have just straight up said, you know what, I'll take the next one. I'll take a free second here and I'll go crazy next conflict. And now he's been incentivized to go in there, so I think David's got to defend. Again, these players that are behind are just they're bleeding each other a little bit. And I think, again, this comes from a place of like you want to try to get your little edges, and this game is a game that punishes that. Now, actually, a nice thing about this play is that Alec actually just can't push in troops. If he has faction access, he can by going to still suits, but he doesn't have the water to take any of the other action spaces. So if Alec doesn't have any Fremen access, then that's it. He's got no more troops that are going in there. Fascinating. And David leans on it. Oh man, I love that. I was just saying that he needed to push more troops in, but I really appreciate the boldness of this play. Like he is saying, if there's all I care about is winning, there's no place but first place. And if I win this conflict, I also need to win the next conflict if I have any hope of winning this game. And so he's going to try to do it with just this little edge right here. That is really brave and really intelligent. Honestly, I'm kind of blown away that David saw that line, and that is exactly what we're seeing play out here with Alec. He can't he doesn't have a way to push extra troops into the conflict. So now David's just sitting there praying that there's no gunthopters or anything like that to mess things up. That's amazing. Fascinating. So fascinating. He also may have intrigue cards to kind of back up his situation here. No Fremen bond for the Death Commando here means he's really just kind of leaning on the combat that he has. Let me make my face small so we can actually see the combat values that they generate. We'll see Paul over here to my right a little bit, also taking a look and being curious. Oh, I missed something. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Did they count the Fedaykin Death Commando? Do I not know what Fedaykin Death Commando does? let's do a quick Google. Fedaykin Death Commando. Don't worry, I spelled it totally correct. Yeah, he needs a Fremen bond for those 3 swords. That might have been a mistake. Or I missed something. Also very, very viable. Here's a Duncan. Duncan only puts him at 8. So even missing those 3 swords, he'd be at 9. So he'd still have it anyway. We don't really know what the intrigue card situation is, but... Do you have a Spice Hunter I didn't see? Because he definitely has other Fremen cards in his deck. I just didn't see them in that reveal. Oh, and they gave it to him. He has no cards. No contest. There it is. David pushes up. And Alec has a ridiculous 15 spice now. If you had any doubts about who was highlinering this combat, here's a couple extra spice out here as we set up going into round 8, where David will lead us off. All right, so, I mean, David does want to win this conflict. It's another 2-point conflict, but I think it's going to be really difficult with Alec coming in with a Death Star number of troops. So he could try to bleed them in over the conflict, or maybe he could try to go for a turn 9 conflict win. It's a little tough to say. I mean, he's got a point on the Emperor, some points on Bene Gesserit, so that's a couple points that he could grab. David's also got to be asking himself the question, is there any way he can limp himself into a Spice Must Flow with just a ton of card draw? Like, he's got the 3 water. Does he go to the research station, pick up a bunch of cards, and then maybe just kind of try to pay for the Spice Must Flow the hard way, even without the High Council seat? It's possible, but he needs to find a way to make 5 points. Meanwhile, Alec, I think, it's no question, he needs to score 2 points from this conflict, and then maybe even set up, like, he'll go first next turn, and he can Highliner again. So, I mean, his plan, I think, is Highliner, conflict. He's hoping to flip another double, and he's going to have way overkilled that Spacing Guild relationship, and I think we're going to see sort of the chickens come to roost a little bit in terms of having made those choices earlier for heading up there rather than heading up some of the other tracks. He needs to get his point off of the Fremen at some point, and I'm just not sure that he's going to have the time to get the Bene Gesserit or Empire points, which I think is going to be just going to kill him. He's really focused on combat this game, and it's hard to win just with combat, I think. Scott K, I think, probably is going to... Scott K and Scott L, I think, have the same game plan. I think they're going to be trying to buy those Spice Must Flows. I think they're going to have a hard time winning conflicts with the fewer troops. They're out of turn order sequence, so they're never going to be getting Highliner. And just, I don't think they're going to have the opportunity to push quite as many people in as other folks are. And Scott L is looking at a point gain from the Bene Gesserit, but a potential point loss from the Fremen Alliance. So that might end up being a wash. Kind of depends on what David's got going on over there, but I think that's something that he's very heavily considering. Alec here straight up goes to Hardy Warriors. That gives him his point that he needs on there. It also locks that out so other people can't push troops in. I really like this a lot, actually. I think that's a great way for him to just sort of ensure that folks don't get in his way there. Hopefully he's got access for Highliner as well still, but he's not worried about someone else going there as long as he's got, unless there's some crazy intrigue card that throws a couple spice people's way. All right, so we got a Siege Tabur, which I think is probably setting up some water because it just gives some action options that he doesn't have before. Maybe he's going to try to find himself a second one so that he can do a research station action next turn. And then we're going to see if he's going to try to push in. I think here, getting an intrigue card on third is kind of nice. I don't know that the 2 coins really matter, but oh, I see. The water matters because that was that Seek for Life or something like that is going to let him use the water and the spice to draw 3 cards. So intrigue cards have really agreed with his plan. But I mean, frankly, I think he drew a lot of those intrigue cards early in the game, so he knew that his plan was going to be drawing cards throughout the course of the game. And I got to say, one thing I respect about Scott K's game quite a lot is that I think he recognized that was what his focus was going to be pretty early on and leaned really hard into it, which is great. I think I somehow missed Scott L's first turn of going to the Mentat, which I really like. He's got a couple coins, and getting that third action and drawing an extra card, I think is really important. So I'm glad that he prioritized that as the starting player of this round. Oh, that actually means David's going first next turn. I think I got a little bit confused on turn order. So there's a possible world where David ends up picking up the 6 spice so that he can do Highliner action. Frankly, if David is second in this conflict, I think one of those rewards is 2 spice. So he could take like intrigue card, 2 or 3 spice, and pick one of the spice spots this turn, like Haga Basin. And that would give him enough that he could enter the conflict next turn. I absolutely think that's a good line of play for David. Helena here, this time, is she going to take something off the board? She does. She's just going to burn the Missionaria Protectiva. Open up some options for folks. Here's a Fremen camp. That's pretty fun for someone. David being super clear about turn order there, you can tell. Just great. I think they've used the card pretty well this game. Sometimes people don't use that turn order card the most efficiently, and that's fine. I think it depends a lot on the game, but there's enough in this game that I think it's worth being very clear when your turn is over. I could see a Haga Basin play here. Oh, that's got to be a Fremen for a Still Suits. Steal a victory point. Looked like he maybe tried to use it at first to see if you could go to the Emperor. The symbols on them are pretty teensy. And he's going to push in some more troops and make Alec fight for it. It's interesting. I was wondering if he was going to leave him behind to kind of go over the top next turn. Scott L's obviously pretty bummed to see that, but I can't say it's too surprising given what we've seen from David before. And, he can get that point for Duke Leto using his ring to kind of move up the Emperor track there. So that's another point. So David's gone from 2 to at least within spitting distance. Scott here is quickly approaching the end of the turn as the only player who doesn't have 3 actions, thanks to Scott L's Mentat. He's got a boat of cards in his hand. I see 2 worms, diplomacy, liaison, which is 2 persuasion. I wish I could see the rest. I'm curious how much he's got there. Yeah, it was a little tough to see all the cards. I think at least one of them was a dagger. Oh, that's a convincing argument. That's a gurney. Convincing argument, gurney, something else. That's 6. So it looks like he's probably got himself a Spice Must Flow. It's a little bit funny that Gurney Halleck has primarily just been used as a 2 persuasion card this game. Usually his main power is you play him out, he gives you 2 troops, plus, you're going to Carthage or Arcus or whatever, and suddenly he turns into much tougher than Hardy Warriors as he just shows up with a bunch of troops all at once that you can use. And Scott really hasn't been able to take advantage of that because of his opponents. I guess an option is that he could use Gurney, go to Arakeen, and push in just the army. 5 troops that he could push in. But, with the other players going behind him in turn order, they just need to get 1 or 2 troops extra in there. And it's unlikely that he's got a lot of swords in hand, but he knows that it's possible that Alec does have swords in hand with the Thopter. It's a little risky. I don't know what they're excited about right there, but looks fun. Okay, so we are going to see a Gurney play. I mean, he's going to draw a card. I have to assume that this means that Scott's... Oh, I see. He's going to draw 2 cards. So this is probably a little bit risky because I didn't really see the values of the things in his hand. But yeah, it's probably a little bit risky for his Spice Must Flow Dreams, but not the riskiest. Doing a reshuffle here again means that Gurney's going to be in his discard. Is going to be in his discard rather than in his deck, which is a little bit awkward. But frankly, since he's mostly being used as a 2 persuasion anyway. And he pushes in 5 troops here. I think he's debating it because it's like, can he even beat Alec? A person stopping in the middle of their shuffle there means that he's he's running back. He's like, is this really what I want to be doing? Yeah, and he's debating exactly that. It just doesn't feel good to go in. He doesn't think he's going to win. He doesn't have the intrigue cards to support it. I mean, I think maybe pushing at least 1 in is good for the intrigue card. Yeah, intrigue card and a couple dollars. Like, why not? And then next turn, he can just like hope to shove them all in some other. I mean, frankly, he's got too many guys in garrison. Without the sword masters, there's no way he's pushing them all in anyway. So I think he should be pushing in actually maybe 2 or whatever, just to make sure that Scott doesn't get frisky. And again, we see the Worm Riders coming out for some spice and nothing else. No 7 swords. Oh, I guess actually at this point they're only 4 swords, so feels less bad now. As we see Helena go in. Is that for a research station? Oh, he is straight up going for it. He drew a convincing argument off the top. And maybe... Oh, he went to Arakeen, I think. Or Arrakis, rather than... Yeah. He went to Arrakis to draw the card. That's probably a really good draw for him, is my guess. If he went to draw a card, I'd have to assume that he was looking for at least 1 persuasion, and maybe he was praying for 2, and he drew it. We'll see when he reveals. Okay, and we see David here scooping up 4 sice. It's exactly what we talked about. He is going to give himself enough space that he can be the person that heads into the Highliner action, and he's going to use the ring. Wow, exactly as we talked about. Just like we drew it up, David. And putting himself up into tied for 2nd place for someone who was in dead last for so long. And here we go, Highliner to just say, you know what? I know I'm not going to Highliner. Might as well restore all these troops. I'll throw a couple extras in. I'm going to get these 2 points this turn, you guys. Probably only needs 1 or 2. I think Scott L, by the way, should have pushed in... I think he should have pushed in 2 of his troops, stolen the intrigue card from Scott K. Didn't actually talk about that, but he went to Arakeen or Arrakis or whatever to draw that card and get the troop, and he's got 3 troops in garrison right now, but I don't think the odds of him winning a conflict next turn are very high at all. He doesn't have the resources. He's out of sequence of turn order. He's only got 2 actions. I think he's in trouble if he's trying to fight for real. Like, the other people's garrisons are just bigger than his. So I think stealing that intrigue card now probably is the best case scenario for those troops. It's not ideal, but it also hurts the player that is closest to winning. And here we go. We see Scott K does indeed have the 9, pushes himself up. And he is just 1 point away, but he's not going to end it here on turn 8. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. Wow. So the convincing argument that he drew was exactly what he needed. He needed 2 persuasion. And I think he had a couple of options in his deck, but yeah, that was a great rip. I think honestly that he might have been so tunnel focused on that, and that like emotional, I need to draw this thing, that he didn't even think about what to do with the conflict. I could see that being the situation. That's fascinating. All right, couple daggers, couple persuasion here for David, who does probably nothing too interesting. I didn't quite see what he bought, but we're back to having an assassination mission on board, so he bought something, I think. Or 2 assassination missions. And here's a gun thopter. So I think that does mean that Alec is like way over the top here. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you can't risk it. And he's still got 4 troops in garrison, so I think that the extreme push absolutely makes sense. All right, pick some of these. It's going to be some spice. Then the question is whether he takes some money so he can open up like Mentat shenanigans. But I think the odds that he's going to pick up Mentat if he's highlinering are quite low. So probably the intrigue card is just better. And Alec is looking over being like, is that 6 spice? Hate to see that. He will go for the coins rather than the intrigue card. Yeah, I don't know that he'll be able to use those, because I think Alec and Scott K are both incentivized to grab that Mentat, get those extra actions, get that extra card draw. Scott K in particular. So we go into turn 9 here, and we're pretty much guaranteed to end the game here. We need 1 point from Scott K, which he could get from, is probably going to Spice Must Flow. Here's 2 points for the conflict again. Wow. So no like, +2 moves on a track thing. No point stealing or anything like that we're going to count on here. We don't have any power plays. It's unlikely that that's going to be the case. Scott L, I think, is looking at 1 point from the Bene Gesserit Alliance, and then maybe 1 point from Spice Must Flow. So that's going to be his way of limping into 10. Alec is looking at conflict. That's the 2 points that he needs. I don't know that he can find himself a 3rd point, but he does have the most spice right now, although he's about to spend 6 of it. No, he's not just going to spend any of it. Alec needs to find a way to win this conflict. David needs to find a way to win this conflict. David's going to probably highliner right at the beginning. That'll get him to 9. I don't know where his 10th points comes from. That might be his game might be going to 9. And there it is. So Alec needs to find a way to push in lots of troops from reserve. I think a option right now is for him to grab Mentat with those coins, draw a card. I think another option is he's got the 2 water, so he could head to the research station, push in 2 troops, draw a pile of cards. Like, there's an outside chance that he draws into enough persuasion. I think it's unlikely, but possible. And we got a Hardy Warriors here. So he's just saying, you know what? I am really only interested in pushing in as many troops as possible. This will give me 2 more. I am going to try to win this conflict. a different kind of way. That is going to be the best way that he's going to be able to do it. He's got the faction access, so unfortunately it doesn't give him the point. Yeah, I mean, his faction access moves have been so awkward. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's got 8 moves, which, per my thing is worth 4 points, but he's only made 3 points off of it. And it's not like he's anywhere near getting another point. So his faction access moves have definitely been kind of undervalued because of the focused game plan, which, it's generally good to have a focused game plan, but just missing out on a couple opportunities there. Scott K debating his options here. I think he would have loved to do the same thing that Alec is doing, but because Alec went Hardy Warriors, he's asking himself, like, do I even have the opportunity? I think he's probably also realizing that there's no way he can leverage the 6 troops that are there. I think Mentat Open here is his best. Oh, but he has Mentat. Oh, he had an intrigue card that let him spend a spice to get the Mentat. Okay, so that gives him a 3rd action. So actually, maybe he does get in the mix here. I mean, going to the Mentat space on the board also, would have given him a 3rd action, but you can't deploy troops on that. So now he actually has the opportunity to deploy 3 troops. So it actually is viable for him to do that. He is going to use the fold space here and head on out to Erkine, drawing a card. So that's telling me that he really needs extra cards for trying to draw into this Spice Must Flow situation rather than going and picking up that intrigue card. He's valuing that higher, and he will try for it. I don't think he's going to have the opportunity to get there. He doesn't have the water to take certain spaces, so I think he's actually just going to run out of deploy actions that he can take, frankly. Interesting, too, that he used the fold space. I wonder if he has other faction access that will allow him to go like to Still Suits, which is another deploy spot as well. Awesome. Scott K taking the selective breeding is going to be a big deal for him. Lets him draw 2 cards. It's a poor man's research station, but it still is kind of a research station. And it's going to give him a victory point when he grabs this Bene Gesserit alliance. So he really needed to make sure he had that diplomacy card in hand, and it looks like he does. Over Scott's shoulder here, we see Hans Lee, who is the 2022 WSBG Grand Champion. Oh, a Fremen camp is awful spicy here. Yeah. I said I missed it last turn. I remember it being flipped, and I just didn't realize that was the card that David picked up, and he shuffled straight into it, which is amazing. That allows him to push in a huge number of troops. He is now at 3, 6, 7, 8 troops. Wow, that is a huge bummer for Alec, but yeah, that is massive. I think Alec still has to go for combat, but it means that I think his dream of trying to find a 3rd point is basically impossible. Carthag here allows him to get an intrigue card, maybe some combat violence, and push 3 troops in. If he has the Beast Ring, he can push 5 troops in, and that really makes the possible difference. If he's got the Beast Ring here, that's the real question. Does he have Gunthopter? Does he have Beast Ring? He decides that instead of that, he's going to grab the water, maybe because the 2 water will let him do the research station action, or head over to the Great Salt Flat or whatever it is. No ring, though, for that action. Is this going to be an early pass? Just the way he's holding his hand. Maybe it's just a camera thing. Nope, that's a reconnaissance, I think. He's happy to see Carthag be an option for him. And he pushes in some troops. I think with it's going to be 6 troops who are going to take 3rd place here. Oh yeah, Mentat's not really in action. If he's considering Hall of Oratory, it means that he's got... Yep, so he's got exactly 6 persuasion in his hand. That's going to put him to 7 persuasion. So he's just going to take his point and limp there, but he knows he's in trouble because he can't win the tiebreaker at 10 points. Not with 3 spice, he can't. And that was it. I think that was the last of Scott L's actions. I have to assume that the card he would have stolen from Scott K is the Mentat card, which he might not have even been able to use, because if someone had like taken the Mentat action before it even got back to Scott L's turn, he couldn't like steal the Mentat from them. So it's entirely possible that my suggestion of pushing in last turn wouldn't have made any difference whatsoever. Here we see David going for a he's using an intrigue card so he can go wherever. He is picking up an intrigue, probably hoping to draw something exciting, some kind of combat-y type of whatever. Staged incident for victory point, anything, right? All right, let's see what we got here. I'm most interested to see what Alec has. Was that a ring? Oh, that was a ring. 1, 2, 3. I don't know that these 3 cards, well, they might be some swords, but those 2 extra troops, 4, 7, 9, 3, 6, 7, 8. I don't think David's got the sword support, so unless he drew into some intrigue cards, this does look like it's going to be an Alec conflict. Is that going to make him the winner? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Nope. Scott K says, I'm going to pick up some spice. He acknowledges that the spice 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is going to be the tiebreaker. That's the same as points for him. And he's going to push up into 8 troops in there as well. We're going to have to see this combat zone in a minute, so... All right, so we get Scott L passing, guaranteeing that the game is over. We knew that was coming with the Hall of Oratory, but... The thing is that if Scott L had stolen that card from Scott K, he might not have gotten the Mentat, but Scott K wouldn't have had 3 actions. So I think that if Scott L had pushed in last turn, it might be a situation where Alec ends up winning the game. But we'll have to see, I guess, what happens in this conflict. I think that means that Scott K is going to rise out to the top. We get an extra move on the Emperor track, which doesn't do anything. And this is what I was talking about with drawing those intrigue cards earlier rather than later. I think there's a good chance he just drew that. Bene Gesserit sister and Duncan, Idaho for 4 swords here is going to be a big difference. Looks like David produced 17, but we've got 22 from Alec. So looking for a pretty big intrigue card to make the difference here. 3, 6, 7, 8, 16. Is that 16 for Scott K? And he did manage to buy a Spice Must Flow. That is pretty impressive considering how many Spice Must Flows are in his deck. I think that's a pretty nice sequence of draws, although I guess he's drawn all the way through his deck. So in a way, actually, that turn where he had that bad hand was so good because it was actually a very bad hand. So it made his surrounding hands more viable. So, he could have drawn just sort of like mediocre hands for the last couple of hands, but instead he drew extreme good and extreme bad hands. And that's allowed him to continue limping into Spice Must Flows, which is pretty incredible. Yeah, it's the best High Council seat I think I've ever seen in a game. It's done a lot of work. And he's right there at 16. So he's going to pick up 3 spice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 versus Alex 9. So that's going to be 10 spice, which is going to give it to Scott K. I think short of anything insane happening here, or someone having an intrigue card at the end that gives a victory point. I mean, we're going to have a 3-way tie at 10 points. David, unfortunately, is... Oh, okay. So never mind. We've got an ambush here. So Scott K is going to grab 2 more spice. So really, Scott L or Alec need to have a victory point card in hand to make the difference. Otherwise, it is Scott K's now. David, I think, unfortunately, the gas just ran out of the tank. I really appreciate that he tried to make a play at the conflict, seeing that was the way. He did manage to catch up last turn, but then he just didn't have anything else to get anywhere. And he ended up getting a lot of his friendship points. I mean, really, the only friendship that he's missing on is the Bene Gesserit one, and he has an alliance, so he managed to make it there. And we see the handshakes, so it looks like no one has any endgame victory points, and we have a three-way tie on turn 9 for 10 points between Scott K, Alec, and Scott L, and Scott K will go on to advance to the finals, which will be Splendor, which I actually did cover on this channel. Hey, thanks for watching this video with me, everybody. I'm actually not even sure how this is at an increased 50%. It should be a 2-hour video, so if you were here with me the whole way, I hope you enjoyed this. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments about sort of actions or even my comments along the way, things that I might have missed. I certainly make comments from time to time where I'm missing a part of it as I'm trying to keep up with the action, but this was a wonderful time. I hope you have a wonderful day, and hit me with a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers. Bye.